you can reduce your amount of fratricide and you'll be more effective. Marks could be anything from white phosphorus smoke to laser mark, or basically anything the pilot will be able to see from the air. That's called a mark. And if you're able to use those effectively, you can easily reduce the amount of fratricide you do and increase your effect, because the aircraft will of course have an easier time getting eyes on the target and destroying it. Yes. Streamlined and flexible procedures. In ArmA 2 terms, this refers to the freedom of TACP to move away from the main body of the friendly forces and conduct observation. In addition, it involves that both the observer and the weapon operator are on the same page. That means that's why we're doing this course and teaching you 9 lines and CAS briefings and such. That's to make sure you speak the same language, basically, and you can send this info quickly, because as you'll discover later, a 9-line is actually a bunch of complex information narrowed into a simple format where you can send very much information very quickly without really having to do a long talk on the radio. You also need to use, next point, you need to use appropriate ordnance. Some weapons won't do the job, and some weapons may endanger friendly forces. For instance, if you face the if you don't use the correct type of ordnance, you're basically wasting assets. For instance, if you're facing tanks and you have to choose between cluster bombs and a 20 millimeter cannon on a F-35, for instance, and you don't use the cluster bombs, then you're basically wasting your time shooting at them with 20 millimeters, because it won't necessarily destroy or make the tank or make it combat ineffective, whereas a cluster bomb will just destroy the tank right away. So always think about the ordnance you use and request from the aircraft. And lastly, favorable environmental conditions. Of course, that's pretty straightforward. Don't do CAS. Don't do a CAS mission with less than 3,000 meter visibility. And in real life, CAS wouldn't even consider flying in sandstorms or blizzard, stuff like that. Not that applicable to ArmA, but you need to think about the environmental conditions, also terrain features and such. Okay. Yeah, basically we could spend hours going on each one of the phases in close air support, so we're gonna try and break it down to some ultra minimal forms, so you guys know what you need to know, because it's a basic level we work on in ArmA. We don't work on battalion level and above. We simply can't do that in game. So we're just gonna go over this again. Planning. Read the mission briefing, copy and understand what aircraft you'll have available, what in the area can shoot them down, the enemy threat, and how you will use your aircraft to destroy that threat, or otherwise achieve the commander's intent. Give aircraft initial orders, get airborne, come on station IP4, determine where you will be during the mission. Make sure you can observe friendly movement and enemy forces, and get confirmation from the commander. That's just planning outline for you real quick. You have preparation phase as well. In game now, now you're in game. You will establish comms with your aircraft, get an ordnance check, confirm the inbound, and set up your radios and begin movement to an observation post. In more complex missions, this would also involve rehearsals and practice, probably. Finally, your execution phase, you will observe for targets and send CAS requests to the aircraft until the mission end state. You will ensure aircraft do not fly into artillery, and you will use artillery support employment of aircraft, which usually means a white phosphorus fire missions to mark targets. Any questions? We just went over a lot of shit here, basically. So it's fine to if there's something you're still not certain about. Nothing at all?
Got a bunch of badasses in here.
Yeah, apparently.
I do like
okay.
this.
Now we're going to move on to a CAS briefing. So now you've gone away from your company, your platoon, or whatever, and you set up an OP and you spot a contact, or you get a request for CAS from another unit. You need to control attack aircraft onto the enemy. You would provide, and in that case, you would provide a CAS briefing via radio or text to an attacking aircraft, so it understands how to attack the target and avoid danger. The most common briefing format for CAS is the 9-line for close air support. And we'll find a simple way and we're going to be trying to explain CAS briefings now. So right here we have what's called a 9-line on the right side, and on the left side we have an explanation for what's called an offset. We'll talk about that later. So basically, yeah, a 9-line it involves a bunch of stuff. I'm just gonna 1 second. Okay. So 9-line would include some basic points here. It will involve making contact with the aircraft, for instance, Enfield 1-1. This is Death Star 1-1, and then you send a type of control. We're gonna go over that later, exactly what that means. But then you send type 1, 2, or 3 in effect. For instance, in this instance, type 1 in effect. You send what's called an IP, or if it's a helicopter, BP usually. BP means battle position. In this case, it's a predefined ingress point called fort. You should always have predefined IPs in missions whenever you can. Then 1 sec. Then you give. Because don't you have that fancy slide where we can show everything immediately?
Where what?
That slide where you can see IP heading.
Yeah, that's later on. That's after you do the. That's after you go over type 1. The way it's set up is it's supposed to. It goes over each element of the 9-line, then it goes to type 1, and that's when that other slide is. If you want to jump to it now, it's on 14.
Okay.
Or I guess 15. It's up here somewhere. There we go.
There it is. Okay. So reference left side here. We're just going to use this practical example here. So we have the aircraft holding at control point, and then in this case the JTAC calls in for a type 1, and it goes like this. Dragon 3-1, this is Icebox 1-1. This will be type 1 control, advised and ready for 9-line. That lets the aircraft know it's going to be a type 1 of control, which we'll go over later, and then he shall advise when he's ready to copy that information down. In game, that means you should be ready to write stuff down. And then the attack aircraft will call Icebox 1-1, Dragon 1-3, ready to copy. The JTAC doesn't need to say anything else. He just goes ahead with his 9-line. Okay. And then in this case, it's just says Plymouth 360. Right. So that means that he should come in from ingress point Plymouth and go north and be offset right. We're gonna go over that in a second. Next line is 9.1, which means there is 9.1 kilometers from the IP to the target area. Then it says 350, which means the elevation of the target area, how high above sea level we are. Then it says platoon of infantry dug in. That's the target description. What kind of target is he facing? Then he gives a grid. In this case, Charlie Mike 3679 or 71. And that's just for confirming what information we already have given the pilot, so he knows. We tell him where he should go, what direction he should go, how far he should go, and how high above sea level and the target is, what type of target it is, and what grid it's on, just to confirm. Next, we're gonna go. He's gonna say white phosphorus, which is the mark. What kind of mark have we placed? Next is friendly location, south 900, troops in contact. So just south that the enemy target 900 meters is friendlies in contact. That lets the pilot know that he shouldn't risk dropping early. He should always, or if he has to drop off, better after better a little bit too late than too early, basically. And finally, last line is egress, and in this case, it's egress to egress east to CP Dodge. So that means when he gets in there, drops his bomb, then he should just turn directly to the east and fly back to CP Dodge. Once you give him all those 9 lines, then you say advise and ready for remarks. And in here, the pilot should have written all of it down, and then he says ready to copy remarks. And then JTAC gives some extra information, like in this case, final attack heading, which is basically a cone that the pilot is allowed to attack within, and might be getting ahead of himself here. Too bad. So in this case, it's from degrees 285 to 330, and that's the area of that's like the cone he's allowed to attack within, and that's to avoid him hitting the friendlies to the south. Then he also gives the information that there's a CSU-23 with 4 guns north 1,000 meters, so he knows, so the pilot knows that he shouldn't go much farther north than this target, basically. He also says continuous suppression gun and gun target line 045. That means friendly artillery is suppressing that anti-air gun, and from that target, which is the anti-air gun, to the friendly artillery is 45 degrees. Finally, he says report IP inbound, and that means report when you're flying in from the IP.
Question?
Yeah.
So, says final attack heading 285 to 330, but he's ingressing from the south 9 kilometers. Is the idea that he would divert to the right and then come back in on a heading of 285 to 330?
Yeah, I'm just going to show you this picture here.
Okay.
Look at the picture on the left. At one point he says offset right, or he just said in the case before he said 360 right, and that means he gives the pilot heading from the IP to the target, but he also says that the pilot should fly right as he comes into the IP, and there can be a ton of reasons for that. In this example, because he has friendlies between the IP and the target, and doesn't want the aircraft to get directly on top of them. He wants it come in from the right to make sure he hits the right place.
Actually, as far as I see it, it's deconfliction with the artillery suppressing the enemy air defense, so he doesn't fly into the friggin', bullets.
That too. There's a variety of reasons for that. It could be deconflicting, it could be avoiding fratricide or whatever. In this case, there are 2 excellent reasons. He doesn't risk going into enemy artillery or into friendly artillery, and he doesn't risk fratricizing. That's why he gets that offset to right, and also why he gives this attack heading, where he comes in from the right and attacks the target. Okay, now that's the JTAC's part. That's the JTAC's cast briefing, where he gives the 9 line, and he gives the remarks. And remarks are basically just anything special about this exact briefing. For instance, if there's a final attack heading, you don't always need to have that, but if there is, and where the enemy air threats are, and what kind of conflict that could be, and finally that he has to report when he's inbound from the IP. He doesn't necessarily have to do that either. That's the initial cast brief. Are there any additional questions to that?
Yeah, I got a question here. Does the anywhere in the 9 line or anywhere in the actual talk on does it say what the intended effect on the target will be? I mean, there are different variants what you can do to a target. Basically, you can either suppress the target, you can destroy the target, you can
Yeah, that's in the remarks.
Neutralize the target, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's in the remarks. where you in the remarks you say what kind of ammunition you want him to use, and you say what kind of effect you want. For instance, if you say you use gun continuous suppression, that means that pretty much it means just shoot them with the gun. Or you can say use cluster bombs for destruction or whatever. But that's in the remarks. That's because that's specific to yeah. The 9-line is where the aircraft should actually fly, and what kind of targets is engaging. And remarks you say specifically for this target, I want you to do this and this. Hope that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Jake? Or
Yeah, partly. We'll probably come back to that at the battle damage assessment thing.
There's
anyways.
a bunch of different things that can go into remarks and restrictions. I don't know if Godhand was going to go over those, but it's part of the course.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to this. Sorry about that, Klaus. Yeah. So now we just took the 9-line. There's another example here. But we don't have a picture for though. In this case, you can notice the remarks are a bit different. In this case, he wants to use an ADM 65. There's a Zeus north, 500 meters, and it designates what's called a time on target. That's the time the aircraft can actually can engage the target in, and that's based on the clock. So 45. That's right now we're at 21:02 Zulu time, and so in this case it would be from 21:45 to 21:50. That's the time he gets to engage that target. Then he has to be off target again. Yeah.
I'd like to point out, I don't think watches in ArmA are synchronized.
Well, they should be.
Don't think they are. Unless that's been fixed.
What you can do is you can get a hack time. So pretty much you just ask the pilot what his hack time is, and then he'll tell you his current time, and then you can go off of that. And they are synchronized if you JIP'd, or correction, if you start at the same time. And it's dubious if they JIP'd.
I think they go off over time, but they start correct.
Weird. I didn't know that. Okay. So just reviewing the 9-line, we have IP, heading, distance, elevation, target description, target location, type of mark, location of friendlies, and egress direction. Now, what I skipped before, probably shouldn't have, is we have 3 types of CAS mission control that is possible. That's type 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. Type 1 is what we're looking at right now, and that's when you see when the JTAC sees the target and will be able to see the attacking aircraft, and this allows a positive control of the attack aircraft. So basically, that means if there's a risk of the aircraft hitting friendlies, this is the best way to go, because you can see the target, you can see if that moves or situation changes. You can see you can see the aircraft as it comes in, and you can see if he's going the right direction to actually hit the target, and so you can more easily abort him in time if he's about to hit friendlies. Type 2 is used on point targets, and that's targets that you learn about through other means. It could be a recon, battle tracking software, troops that are in contact, or your commands, orders, etc. And that's used if you can't see the target or the attacking aircraft, then you call for type 2 control. Finally, type 3 is like a type 2, except you authorize the aircraft to engage targets within an area that you restrict, and it's used for more general interdiction. So that could be, for instance, a road where you know that enemy armor is going to be traveling up along. Then you can authorize the aircraft to engage targets along that road, but it would be restricted to only attack that road and nothing else. Any questions on those three for now? Okay. So type 1 control, just reviewing that again. JTAC must visually identify the target he's going to be hitting. And JTAC will send a 9-line CAS briefing to the aircraft. The attack aircraft will verify target location and confirm that it correlates with expected target area. And then the aircraft reads back line 4 and 6, and you always do that. And that's and you also read back any restrictions JTAC gives in the remark section. The reason you want to read back line 4 and 6, 4 is for making sure the aircraft knows what elevation is engaging at, and 6 is to make sure that it knows what grid is engaging. And of course, if you give restrictions like there are friendlies 900 meters, not that, but if you tell it you give the aircraft a ceiling or grid it can't go, a northing or easting it can't go past, then he should also read that back to you, so you're sure that he knows he's not going past at those points you mentioned. Then JTAC provides a verbal description, also known as a talk on, to the mark and or target, and confirm the aircraft correctly identifies the mark and or target. So, for instance, you can see the white phosphorus picture. That's a pretty good mark. It can be seen easily from the air and from the ground, and there the JTAC confirms that the aircraft sees that white phosphorus. And if he doesn't, then he needs to make sure the aircraft can see it or change his CAS briefing so it will be possible for the aircraft. Once you get that mark down, the aircraft will provide IP inbound if requested, if the JTAC asked for that in the remark section. If he doesn't, then the aircraft will just go ahead. JTAC will mark and designate the target as practicable. So, of course, you won't laser mark a target that he can't really laser mark or something else. Then the attack aircraft will provide an in call indicating it's entering its terminal phase of air to ground attack prior to weapons release. In would also be followed by in from the east or in from the north or a cardinal direction, so the JTAC knows exactly what direction to look for that plane. Attack aircraft will visually acquire a target on mark and send that as a report, and JTAC will visually acquire the attacking aircraft. And only when the aircraft see the mark and the JTAC sees the aircraft, then the JTAC will analyze the aircraft geometry, as it's called, to make sure the aircraft is facing the right direction and getting ready to attack hostile forces. Once that's done, JTAC will either clear the aircraft hot, or he will abort the mission if one of these points above doesn't add up. That could be any from the aircraft not seeing the mark to the aircraft is simply pointing a different way than the JTAC expected. And it is, as I said before, it is only the JTAC that can clear pilot hot, and if he doesn't get a cleared hot, then you simply don't drop your ammunition. Are there any questions on that? This is type 1 type of control where you pretty much foolproof your entire close air support mission. Then in the continued of type 1, we put in remarks, and that's where we impose, or we say what kind of ammo you want. For instance, 2 times air-to-ground mission 65 Delta. You could put in enemy air threats. You'll put in if there's any markings on friendlies, like green smoke in this case. You give a time on target again. if you need to, if you need to tell the pilot that he only has a certain amount of time to actually complete his objective. And if friendlies are danger close, and danger close depending on what kind of weapon you're using. If you're using a 30mm cannon, you can basically go within 30 meters of friendly units before it's really danger close. But if you're using cluster bombs and stuff like that, you have a bigger danger close radius. But you need to advise the pilot on that, and I think in general you say, and depending on weapon, around 600 or 300 meters is danger close. Finally, you also give the aircraft restrictions, like the image we saw before, where you have it could be to deconflict, it could also be to, because you are certain that if he gets across a certain line, he'll be shot down by manpads or something like that. Okay, no questions for Type 1 control at all? Remember that remarks are extremely important part of this CAS request. You can't just send a 9-line. You need to tell the aircraft its remarks, which are the special features of the CAS mission and restrictions. And it could be, again, ammo types, threats, hazards to aviation, including the weather, additional target information, time considerations, and if there are any friendly mark, then that as well. A common restriction could be final attack heading, which we talked about before, final attack heading X or final attack heading XX. So that means you can either just give one exact final attack heading that you can only go along this bearing for your final attack heading, or you can give out a cone, which is a large area to do your final attack heading. You get those in magnetic degrees or cardinal directions. Final attack heading is a restriction often used for gun or rocket runs, which limits the attack heading to the aircraft, and it's often done to deconflict fire support from the aircraft with nearby friendly ground troops, or to keep the aircraft a distance from nearby air threat. When it's given as a range, it's a cone or sector of fire that's acceptable. You also want to give geographical references. Make all your attacks parallel to the road, for instance, or make all attacks above northing 6-1, or restrict all fires on the west side of Hill 48, etc. Also, if danger close, the pilot needs to know it's danger close. And in reality, it's different per weapon, but in ArmA you want to use within 600 meters. That should be considered danger close, depending on how good your pilot is. Again, time on target, we'll talk about that. And you also want to say altitude, either designate lowest altitude or ceiling that the plane should stay within. Any questions on remark section? Nope. Okay. We also have some no-nos when you give this CAS briefing, because, for instance, a lot of people tend to say all the stuff in the 9-line. I sometimes do it if I have a new pilot, but in general, it shouldn't be done because it's a waste of time, and that's stuff like saying line 1 IP Fort, line 2, blah blah blah. Another thing you should do is saying break each time you do each time you send information, because usually that kind of comm security shouldn't be necessary for you when you talk to an aircraft. So you want to say, so you just want to say all the information fluently, and the aircraft is basically only waiting for you to finish your 9-line. Okay, so you wouldn't say line 1 Fort, line 1 IP Fort break, line 2 heading 360 break. That's just a waste of word when you can just say Fort 360, 4,000 meters, etc. Also, another thing you don't want to do is use words like 1900. We usually communicate NATO language here, and in NATO phonetical there is no numbers above 9. We only have ranging from 0 to 9. If you say 1900, you say 1900, because then there's no misunderstanding. 1900 could easily be misunderstood for something else, or just be said with my weird Danish tongue that will curl up and make it sound to something different to you guys. Always just say some single numbers. Also, when you give for instance, when you give target location, don't say 140312. Just say it as one number, 140312. So the pilot doesn't think you just say 140 and move on to a different line, or a bunch of other stupid stuff can happen. Any questions on the no-nos? Okay.
For grid coordinates, you might want to preface that with like either 6-digit grid or 10-digit grid or something like that.
Yeah,
the
because
pilot knows how many numbers to expect.
Yeah, you should only give 6 digits.
Okay.
Don't need more. You should need a more precise target location, because you're gonna be the pilot is gonna be engaging a specific target anyhow. So he just needs to be told within this 100 times 100 meters. That's where you look for your target.
Yeah, just see it as the initial phase where you're guiding the pilot onto that area.
Yeah. So you should never give more than 6 digits, because it's again a waste of time.
Yeah, I was just saying it's usually good practice to do, to preface that.
Yeah, unless the point is in the 9 line we already know what we're going to be told. So
Right.
When you get to line 6, the pilot should know he's going to get a 6-digit grid. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay. Now we're going to go back to the example mentioned before. I actually wanted to do this first just to show you what was in the 9 line, but we're going to go over this again. So in this case, you get a very specific 9 line with pictures showing you. So you say in this 9 line, you can see an example of a 9 line here, where it's what JTAC would say, Dragon 3-1, this is Icebox 1-1. This will be type 1 control, advise and ready for 9 line. Icebox 1-1, Dragon 3-1, ready to copy. And then Icebox 1-1 just goes ahead with his signal, which is Plymouth 360 right, means offset right. 9.1 is 9.1 kilometers. So, most times in ArmA we won't get up to that range. We'll just say like 3000 4 meters or something like that. 350 is target elevation. Platoon of infantry dug in. Target description. And then grid, which will just be your 6-figure grid. In this case, 367 971. Mark white phosphorus. South 900, troops in contact. It's important that you mention that it's troops in contact if that's the case, because then we might have all kinds of ammunition outgoing from those troops in contact. They might be firing javelin missiles or rockets or anything, so you would see a bunch of explosions in that line between the enemy and the friendlies. Finally, egress direction, in this case, egress east, and then go, to dodge. That means as soon as you dropped your ammo or whatever you're doing, then turn directly east and go to CP dodge right away. Then advise ready for marks once you've sent all 9 points. So Plymouth 360 right, 9.1, 350, platoon of infantry dug in, Charlie Mike 367 971, white phosphorus, south 900, troops in contract, egress east to dodge, advise ready for marks. Then the aircraft might go silent for a few seconds to make sure he copied all his shit down. Ready to copy remarks. Final attack heading 285 330. TSU 23.4 from the target north. Continuous suppression gun target line. 045, report IP inbound. That's it for the CAS briefing.
Question.
Yeah.
If you say continuous suppression in the remark section, don't you normally mean that you want the aircraft to do continuous suppression? Is there any
I think this
distinction
line
when
is
the
a bit. This is a
Yeah.
bit. He doesn't, because this line actually doesn't say that it's this gun is being suppressed. You just get that there's a gun and there's a continuous suppression. So yeah, I would say CSU 23 for North 1000 being suppressed continuously, gun target line 045. So the pilot knows it's friendly is firing at the gun, and he's not supposed to attack the gun.
Yeah, you don't use continuous suppression to refer to the aircraft. You would just say, if he was going to use guns or rockets, you would just say guns or rockets. Continuous suppression is referring to what's known as suppression of enemy air defenses, or SEAD or SEAT. Pretty much, it means that this target is being continually suppressed, and the rounds are coming in from bearing 045. And you can see in the picture, there's a 45-degree angle off the target, and off the Zeus that's north of the target, and there's a paladin shooting at it.
If the gun target line is 045, wouldn't the rounds be coming from 225 from the Zeus?
That's possible. It might be reversed, but the general idea is that the gun target line is the bearing from the gun to the target. So it would actually be. It should actually be like over here somewhere. Like right, yeah, it should be like this actually. Like that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, then the next thing is we're gonna enter the control phase, because now the aircraft knows what it's doing. He has copied his remark and he sends back his restrictions. So he would say 350, Charlie Mike 367 -71. Final attack heading 285 330. Report IP inbound. That's what he needs. The pilot needs to read back from this entire briefing. And once that's done, once he has given his read back, the JTAC will say read back correct, time on target 50, or he would say, "Oh, that's wrong," and then he'd send the CAS briefing again if something was wrong, so make sure the pilot knows exactly what's going on. Then
just to jump in here, people are asking what CM is. That's the grid zone designator on the map sheet, and that's not used in ArmA. But if you could imagine like Chernobyl and Podgorsk being connected, like if it was all one continuous map, like Podgorsk would be one grid zone designator and Chernobyl would be another. It's just it's for bigger maps. It's not used in ArmA, so just ignore that in this example.
Okay. So now we have sent the CAS briefing. The readback is correct, and the pilot knows his time on target is 50. Then we go to the attack control phase, and that's where Dragon 3-1 would just call out on his net and say Dragon 3-1 IP inbound, and that's where the JTAC already the situation might have changed so much already that the JTAC might need to call this off. In this case, he says continue. That means the situation hasn't changed enough. And then he would advise mark is on the deck. When it is on the deck, the attack aircraft would advise contact the mark. That means he sees the mark. If he doesn't see the mark, he would say like no joy, no contact, or stuff like that. So the JTAC knows the pilot can't see. The pilot can't see the mark. Then he would want to abort the mission, or he want to abort the mission. Then JTAC in this case advises from mark south 100. That means the mark actually landed north of the target area by 100 meters, and that's telling the aircraft that what he should engage was 100 meters south of that mark there. Then once the aircraft sees the mark and has contacted the mark and gets told that it's south 100, he has to hit. Then he says in from the east, meaning that he's coming in and he's flying in from the east, so the JTAC knows what to look for him.